Thank you very much to Edge for organising the webinar and inviting Pear to take part. Pear has worked closely with Edge over quite a number of years now with integrating our maps and data with the Edge systems. I'll just stress, as we've got on the first slide there, this is Pear Technology Services Limited. So we do provide services as well as software. So just to relay, the presenters today will be myself, Jonathan Smith. As I said, I've worked in the local council sector for a number of years, specialising in cemeteries, assets and particularly trees. And I'll be covering the first section of the presentation. Mark, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, good morning, everyone. For those of you I haven't met before, my name is Mark Lloyd. I'm the Managing Director of Pear Technology. So I've been working in mapping and GIS for 18 years. And later on in the presentation, I'll be talking to you about our map preparation services and how our maps can be put online and shared with members of the public and can connect to other Edge services such as Epitaph and AdvantEDGE. So great, so over to you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Mark. We'll also be joined at the end of the presentation by Holly Parfoot, who's our experienced local council cemetery and mapping manager. So we'll take questions and answers at the end of the session. Next slide then, please, Mark. You'll get used to the next slide thing. You. So the key points that we're covering today is map creation for cemeteries, allotments and assets, and the linking of the map to data and then publishing that to the web to make that available to members of the public as well as wider use by the council. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So we'll look at Ordnance Survey mapping and GIS for local councils. We'll show the data on the map and how that can be managed and linked to related data. So it can cover council land, council assets, trees, cemeteries, allotments and plans, as in planning applications. Next slide, please. We'll look at desktop mapping, which means you've got the mapping software on your PC. Linking the data to maps, GIS, which I'll mention again in a moment. Performing surveys by the council or by Pear, so we can, as a service, provide surveys, and we provide the service of linking web maps to data. Very important point, though, to make that you, the council, own the data that you add to the map. Next slide, please. So the map data, the Ordnance Survey master map data, which we'll have a look at in detail in a moment, but that's where we start from as a base, the Ordnance Survey master map data. That is free to local councils under the PSGA, the Public Sector Geospatial Agreement. Basically, government subsidises the provision of map data to this sector. If it weren't for the PSGA, the cost of that data would be very significant. So for Farnham Town Council, big council, 3,600 hectares, the annual cost would be £2,642 per year for the use of the OS Mastermap data. Much smaller council, Datchet, 660 hectares, but it would still cost them £580 per year. So very significant saving, if you like, by getting that data free under the PSGA. Next slide, please, Mark. We'll look at sources of map data. So the Ordnance Survey Master Map, as I mentioned, so this is the reference source of map data. The APGB, which is the Aerial Photography Great Britain data set, is aerial imagery free to councils, basically under the PSGA. The National Tree Map, which is from a company called Blue Sky, who also provide the APGB, and that gives you the position, the height and the crown spread for every tree over 3 meters high. And the collection of surveyed data, so for assets, land, trees, whole variety of things actually that you can collect data for by asset and add those items to the map. Next slide, please, Mark. So I've mentioned GIS a number of times. That stands for Geographical Information System. And what that means is the ability to link data to a map. So here, just to give you an idea, is an area of land in Carlisle, by the looks of it. It's council-owned land, has an area of 0.26 hectares, and there's some reference number for that particular area of land. So this is just an example, but we can link wide range of data to the map, and you can add a whole lot more features and attributes than we see there. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the APGB, Aerial Photography Great Britain. So it comes from a company called Blue Sky. They've flown over the country at a low level in a plane, so it's not satellite imagery, it's from a plane, and they have 2 cameras on the plane to give them a stereoscopic view, and this gives them 12.5 centimeter resolution, so it's very high resolution data. Next slide, please. So I mentioned Ordnance Survey Master Map data. Here's an example. In terms of how this is shown on a map, what you get is a number of layers. So we've got some example layers there. So building names, building outlines, importantly, land registry inspire data. So we can outline who owns each parcel of land, and also the parish boundary, parish owned land, and a whole number of sets of detail that can be shown on the map. Next slide, please. And here's an example of how this might be used. So the grass cutting area, in this case Harlington Parish Council, very easy to mark those and show those on the map. Also very easy to calculate the area and produce a PDF, for example, for a contractor to go along and cut the grass, and the area can be used for when you're asking for quotes for the work to be done. Very useful to have that there. And we've also got, in this particular case, they've split it down into parish owned land and gardens and cemetery and so on. Next slide, please. So allotments, we've now mapped a large number of allotments. In a way, an allotment is a bit like a cemetery map, I tend to think. They're just larger plots. Sometimes slightly different arrangement of plots, as we see in this case. And what we've done here is this is a web map, so it's accessible via the web, and it will be possible then to link that web map to data and show all that available via the web as well. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the National Tree Map data from Blue Sky. They interpret the data that they've collected by flying over the country at low level. And because it's two cameras giving them a stereoscopic view, they can capture for each tree that's over 3 meters high, the position, the height and the crown spread of each tree. So what that gives you is a number of circles shown on the map, and the circle is in proportion to the size of the crown of the tree. Having done that and brought that onto the map, it's then very quick and easy to select all of the crown area. That works out a total area of crown spread in your parish, and you can then compare that area, the area of crown spread, to the total area of parish map, which will then give you a percentage of canopy cover for your parish. You might take that as a base point and say, well, we would like to go from 10% to 15% canopy cover. There's a lot of benefits of having trees in the parish. So this then gives you a starting point as to the current area of canopy cover, and it gives you a number of figures, but basically it's the position, the height and the crown spread of each tree. That data, incidentally, can be imported into a survey template so that a tree surveyor or a council person, for that matter, can take a handheld device into the field, and the trees will already be marked on. The basic data from the National Tree Map will already be populated into the survey, so you only then add what additional data you want to add. Next slide, please. So as Chris Edge mentioned, we've been working with Edge and working to link the maps to the InspectEDGE system. So we can take the Ordnance Survey map and put that on a phone or tablet and collect survey data such as for assets and cemeteries. And I think the other details, the allotments and playgrounds, will be linked in due course. Next slide, please. So here's just an example, and Edge will no doubt supply you further details, but the sort of data that can be collected on the InspectEDGE app, it's laid out, I tend to think, as if it was a paper form, so it's very straightforward and intuitive to fill in, and you'll see on the bottom right hand side of the InspectEDGE screen is the button which says View on Map. Next slide, please. So here we've got another InspectEDGE example, this time for allotments, which Roland Potter was mentioning earlier. Again, nice sort of straightforward form to fill in. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, site surveys, you can do these yourselves. We at Pear can hire you equipment for doing the surveys, or we can come along and do surveys for things like assets. In the case of trees, we have about 350 tree surveyors on our books as clients. So we could give you a list of local tree surveyors. That's a somewhat more specialist area. So I'd recommend a qualified tree surveyor to collect the data, and the data they collect can then be brought across onto the map and linked to the map. So other examples there, as well as trees, can survey hedges, can be used for ecology, rights of way, land boundaries, as well as the items we mentioned before, cemeteries, assets and allotments. Next slide, please. So in respect of a tree survey, this is the sort of thing that you might capture. This is a particular type of survey, threat survey, and you can see that you'll be prompted to fill in certain information. But again, if this is done by a professional tree surveyor, they will very quickly and easily sort of fill in those details. Just a bit of background there. I've got one particular client who has recently surveyed over the past 6 months 28,000 trees on 2,000 sites for a national housing association. So you can see it can be a very productive way of working. Next slide, please. So having collected the data, here we've got some council assets. The data has been collected. We've put this on the map and we've published that map to a website to make it accessible to all. In this particular case, we've selected a rather exciting litter bin. Next slide, please. So just to emphasize the point in a way, in this particular case, we've got Folkestone Town Council. So this is taken directly from their website. So the data and the map is hosted on the council's website, and there's certain layers that can be turned on and off to make the map clearer to see. There's areas of land, we can see the park farm road allotments there, and also details about bins and benches, and this makes it much easier for a member of the public to identify an item if they think there's something that needs reporting. So very simple to use, clear, and the map itself would be set up for you by Pear as part of our services. And I'm going to now hand you over to Mark. So I'll say for the last time, next slide, please.
Great, thanks Jonathan for taking us through the first part of our presentation. So I'm going to continue from Jonathan and talk to you about our map preparation services first of all. And I'll start that by just covering a few key points about why a cemetery map is essential. First of all, good quality maps enable you to locate graves easily. It makes it easier to operate a cemetery for the contractors, for the cemetery staff, and for members of the public visiting the cemetery or planning to visit. They can check the location of graves online, understand the layout of the cemetery. For internal use, it will help you identify or sell pre-purchase graves. It will help in the future planning of the cemetery, identifying how much land is available, how much capacity there is for future use. And features other than graves can be mapped as well. So for management purposes, things like the trees, the drains, benches, all these things that need to be maintained can be mapped out. You could map out things like water butts and so on, where or toilets and other facilities that members of the public may be interested in. And of course, the final point, it's a legal requirement to record the location of burials, so maintaining that map is absolutely essential. So the maps we produce, they're all aligned with the Ordnance Survey master map data, the master map topography layer, very detailed, accurate data, type of data Jonathan was mentioning before. It's free for councils to use, and private operators would just pay a small fee just to cover the area of interest around their cemetery. Using the master map data means that all the maps we produce are geo-referenced and that they can easily be combined with other data sets which are geo-referenced as well, such as aerial imagery, drone imagery, and can be used on site with GPS devices. So I'll come to some examples in a bit about those. So the map preparation service itself, when we're creating a map, we're not just taking a paper map and returning a digital copy of it. It usually involves working with a number of different data sets to ensure it's correct, spatially correct. So we pull together all those sources, analyze those, compare them, and make sure that the digital map is georeferenced and accurate. So we typically work from paper maps, often when they've been scanned. Excel, Word documents might contain diagrams, aerial imagery, different sources, APGB, Ordnance Survey, from drones. We take in data from CADs, plans, and other GIS applications as well. Refer to publicly accessible mapping like Google, using site photographs, and also GPS surveys, information collected on site. So to run through a few examples, as you can see, the top left corner, you can see this rather fragile paper map, and in the bottom right corner, you can see the digital map, a nice crystal clear map after it's been digitized and presented in the HeritEDGE mapping system and linked to Epitaph. So the scanned maps, the paper map has been scanned by our scanning partner ScriptEye. Philippa Harrison at ScriptEye works with a number of clients to digitize their paper maps and preserve them for the future. And once they've been digitized, they can be passed across to us, makes it very easy for us to work from, and helps make the mapping process as smooth as possible. So here's an example, slightly better condition, scanned map in the top left corner. However, it didn't cover the full extent of the cemetery, and we also had to work with some other data sets, some diagrams in Word, some layouts in Excel, pull all those together and to create the georeferenced map, as you can see in the bottom right corner. Here's an interesting example. It's quite common actually, particularly for small cemeteries, to maintain a very basic map, schematic map really, in Excel. So you can see an example screenshot of that in the top left corner. It will identify where graves are in relation to each other. We then take that and move it to the next level. The Excel form of diagrams works fine for some very, very small cemeteries, but as capacity increases, they need a more robust system, and that's where we step in to digitize that and provide a georeferenced map. So I mentioned drones, and here's a good example of some of the imagery from a drone. The client in this case has sourced the imagery themselves, and that's been based on a specification that we've provided. For mapping purposes, it has to meet certain criteria in terms of resolution, accuracy, and a few other aspects to do with the positioning of the data, which are important as well. So we pass all that information across. We've worked with the imagery, and we've digitized the plan. So we've digitized all the existing graves, and we've marked on new proposed sections as well. So that's ready for future use. So it's important to point out, we zoom into the mapping so we can see that a bit clearer. All of the graves we've drawn on the map are drawn as polygons, as closed areas. So some basic mapping systems may just show you a map with points identifying each grave. Our mapping goes much further. We put a lot of effort into making the maps as accurate as possible and drawing the actual dimensions of each grave, so it's clearer to see on the map, clearer to see the difference between burials and cremation plots, and it's a true representation of what's on the ground. And as you can see in this example, you've got some some graves which are clearly quite bigger than others on there. So moving on to the next example, this is where we've taken some CAD data. So a surveyor has been out to this site and carrying out a topographic survey. Our mapping software allows us to take data from a number of sources, CAD being one of those. We can import that into our mapping system, extract the data we need, process that so that it can then be converted into a web map, and you can see it's nice and accessible via HeritEDGE in the bottom right corner of the screen. Also to point out, we can work with GIS data from other systems as well. So sometimes we've encountered councils where they've already got some mapping in their own GIS system, so we can convert that and bring it across into our system as well. Here's an interesting project we worked on over the last year or so, where we pulled together data from a number of sources in this example, and there's a big challenge here where there was a lack of information in some of the areas. So what we've done, we've worked from the scanned maps, we've digitized as much information from those as we can. We've then obtained, or the council rather, has obtained some drone imagery, which we've brought across into our system, which has helped us to verify some of the details and the location of the graves. We've then compared that against the data in Epitaph to ensure that grave numbers all match up. And as a final check, one of our team has been to site with an accurate GPS to plot the location of each grave, so then we can just carry out all the final checks in there and ensure the maps are as good quality and accurate as they possibly can be. And the council's gone an extra stage further in the project and asked us to print out maps which they can display on a board for visitors at the front of the cemetery. So the mapping process involves us working very closely with the client. There will often be a number of draft maps as we discuss the progress of the project with the client. We'll send electronic copies, PDFs, to the client for checking. Paper copies as well. We can send large format paper copies, sometimes easier to work from, and it also means someone can write notes on there if things need to be amended, and they can send that back to us. So quite a helpful way of doing it. So this is just showing a screenshot. There's a video of Epitaph, which I hope works nicely for everybody via the presentation. So if I just play this, what we've got is Epitaph showing a particular record, and the user clicks on the locate button on that record, opens up the HeritEDGE mapping link, and the map will zoom into that particular grave. From there, you can pan around the map and view the context of that grave. So next, I'm going to show you a demonstration video of the publicly accessible version of the mapping HeritEDGE. So what we're going to see is a user carrying out a search. Click on the search, view the results, scroll down for a particular grave record they're interested in. They can click on that result and view the grave location on the map. You can also do this, so you can click on the graves, neighbouring graves, and view the records for view the burials in those graves. So council can choose whether to make this facility available to members of the public. It's not done by default. It allows the public to carry out their own searches for genealogy purposes, and therefore saves the council a huge amount of time having to respond to inquiries. It's obviously easier for members of the public to carry out the searches themselves if they're able to, and identify the details themselves. So next I'm going to show you a demonstration, similar search being carried out, but doing so on a mobile device. So the panel on the left-hand side shows the HeritEDGE webpage again. Search being carried out. HeritEDGE website is mobile friendly, so here's a video of it on somebody's iPhone. And again, carry out the search, view the results, and the map will zoom to that specific grave on the map. The beauty with it being used on a mobile device, you can connect to the location service, the GPS on the phone, and the middle screen shows the red dot. Member of our staff, this is Holly, in fact, went to visit nearby Denmead Parish Council Cemetery, and she wanted to walk to a particular grave, the one highlighted in blue, and you can see Holly's progress, the red dot, moving around the map. So effectively it's just like Google Maps on your phone, except you're not walking to the train station. You've identified a particular grave on here, and you can find that very neat. And of course it's not just members of the public, staff within the cemetery office can use this as well. Extremely useful for finding particular graves, especially those without headstones, and also in natural burial grounds as well, can be very powerful. So going forwards, cemeteries always changing, so we realise that we offer an annual map maintenance service, which means changes can be made to the maps as and when needed. We are continuing to work with Edge, and we will be helping Edge to improve the mapping links over time. We'll be adding some additional features with the Epitaph link, so that specific groups of plots, graves can be highlighted on the plan. So you could run a query from Epitaph, for example, show me where all the vacant plots are. The mapping services we provide will be extended for use with allotments as well, and we have an asset API which will tie into use for markets, playground and allotments as well. Just want to briefly talk about the FARS project, the Funeral Availability Reporting System, and this I think demonstrates the flexibility of our mapping solutions. So FARS is a system that can be used in a pandemic situation where there's particularly high demand, extreme demand for funeral capacity. So we've worked with Edge, the Federation of Burial and Cremation Authorities, and the ICCM, Institute of Cemetery and Crematorium Management, to propose a solution for communicating the availability of funeral capacity. The need for the system came about during the pandemic, and what the system will do is a map-based tool, and it shows color-coded icons to indicate the capacity of funerals at various sites across the country. The data would be input by the operators of those sites. So at the moment, the project's being discussed, and a decision on the next steps is expected by the end of the year. Just to round up, because I'm conscious of time now, so we've got, in summary, Pear provide web-embedded maps which link to a variety of data. We provide cemetery mapping, allotment maps, asset maps. Mapping can be used for events, planning markets as well. We can pull in data from other sources, land registry, hire council data sets as well. It can be used for mapping trees, and all of the services we provide backed up with training and technical support. And just to reiterate, the key point Jonathan made earlier is that the council maintains they keep their own data. It's all theirs. So I hope this has been helpful, and if anyone has any questions, these are our contact details on this slide, and we've also included a few links, some of the references we've been talking about as well. So Thank you very much for listening, and Holly, Jonathan and I will be online now to discuss any questions you have.
Thank you, Mark and Jonathan. I have a couple of questions been posed in the chat, so if I could ask you those, and then anybody else who's got any more can pop them in. Kevin has asked whether the county associations are entitled to use the PSGA.
County associations, that's a good question.
Good question. Go on, Mark.
I was going to say I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but it's certainly something we can check with our contacts at Ordnance Survey who operate the PSGA, and go back to Kevin about, unless you have to know off the top of your head, Jonathan.
I think that they have access via the parish council.
I think the individual councils need to sign up.
Oh, here we go, Holly.
Right, it's Holly. Yeah, I think the individual councils need to sign up within the organisation, and then they can share the data amongst themselves. But it is for organisations in the public sector. The purpose of it is so that data can be easily shared. And if you go on the OS website, there is an eligibility page, so we can share that link later if you want to investigate. But I think it would need to be the individual parishes and towns within that organisation that signed up.
Okay, a couple of other questions. So Julie asked, on the allotment maps, is it possible to measure the square meters of each plot so that they can use it for updating rent charges when they charge by the size of the plot?
Yeah, yes, that's very easy with a one-click requirement. Yeah, so definitely yes.
Okay, good. Amanda, you showed Amanda's map on the website at Horncastle, and she said that it's a comment rather than a question, but she's found it very good using the GPS facility to help her figure out where she is on the site and to walk and get to the grade that she's looking for. One other question that somebody asked was what information, I mean, you've covered some of this, but if you could just summarise what information you need to actually create the map.
Holly?
Yeah, so most councils have some sort of maps of the cemetery, whether it's original Victorian maps, that have been written on or in pieces. They might be in good condition, but they might be out of date. So we can take those. We can also take any maps or diagrams that the council might have drawn up themselves. So quite often we see maps drawn up in Excel or Word. We take those and we look at the imagery that can be seen in Google Earth, and we can work out the orientation of those sections and plot them fairly accurately. Yeah, and we can also work from CAD surveys. So if you've had a professional survey carried out, we can usually take that information in CAD format, convert it, import that in and edit it. And if you don't have anything, or you don't think you've got anything, but you want a map, get in touch with us, and we can always point you in the direction of getting that initial information so that we can then work with that to create the final map and get you started on that. So yeah, there's all sorts of sources we can use to create the digital maps.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for all the questions. So I would just like to say thank you to all three of you for a presentation which we hope everybody found interesting.